I will be surviving 100 days in Australia in hardcore Minecraft. This means I'll have to face the extreme weather, terrain, and wildlife that Australia has to offer, all while not dying once. Oh, and my goal for this video is to build a giant zoo by the end of the 100 days, showcasing all of Australia's animals, both good and bad. And, just like always, this map will be available on my Patreon, and the mod pack I used will be in the description. But, without further ado, let's get started. I spawned in the middle of a forest, however I spotted the Badlands in the distance and wanted to explore it. So, I did. And almost immediately, the heat overcame me. No, come on. Okay. Shade. Come on. Yeah, so on day 1, I was already down to 4 hearts, and needed to find food and water. Not a great start. But I was moving quickly as I jumped from treetop to treetop in search of food. Until I inevitably fell. And with another heart gone, I didn't use that strategy anymore. I soon came across some Australian wildlife, and kinda wished that I hadn't. None of these looked like food sources, and all of them looked like they wanted to kill me. Everything changed though as I came across the ocean. And the ocean has fish. But fish weren't the first thing I came across. That's a sailboat. Okay, we're going to it. Please have food, please have food. Crab. Being the crafty person I am, I took apart this TV made out of wool and built a proper bed. Then, I went to sleep and ended day 1. The next morning, I searched the ship for food but found some normal loot instead. Before leaving though, I looked up and saw a chest at the very top of the ship. So naturally, I climbed. And it was absolutely worth it. I got some weird but really cool loot from this chest that I knew was going to help me out later on. With that being said, it was time to leave the boat behind and look for food on the mainland. And almost immediately, I found a jungle with some inhabitants. I got in a boat and cruised down the river, still in search of food, but the scenery, it was really cool. On day 3, I finally found and killed a fish, but I also realized that I had left the furnace back on the boat. So I got some cobblestone and continued my search for food, when suddenly, I saw this little creature. That is a new one. Okay. However, I quickly came across many more creatures, and was in quite a dangerous position. I did find this tent though, which had absolutely nothing of any use, and so I ventured on, just to find more dangerous creatures. Oh, and that's a snake. Ooh, that's another one. No. It's almost as though Australia is the continent with the deadliest wildlife in the world. Who knew? But that didn't change the fact that I couldn't find food still, and it was getting a little bit worrying. And so the next day, I doubled down on my quest for food, not long before coming across this lighthouse. But maybe luck wasn't on my side, as it was a pillager lighthouse, because I guess pillagers make those now. Either way, I was getting desperate. Desperate enough to go into the ocean for food. And I quickly decided not to. No, I'm okay. Alright. But my luck soon turned around as I spotted another boat. And this one had a resident. And finally, after 4 days, I had found food, among other loot. Not questioning the legality of turtle meat, I filled up my hunger bar and set off to find a place to build my home and zoo. And that's when I noticed I was near the Badlands again. And in order to protect myself from the heat, I would have to make leaf armor. So I made some shears, got some leaves, and put on my armor. But I wasn't getting rid of my Crocs. No, those are very important. Anyways, I was now ready to explore the Badlands and find a spot for my base. And then I came across some emus. Being the smart man I am, I figured that they dropped some kind of meat. So, I killed one. Not only did they not drop meat, but their friend decided to attack me. And these things were scary. Kind of. Look, they were scary to me, okay? I found some animals that did drop meat, but only to realize that the emu had been following me. And so I just killed it. It cost me some health, but it was worth it in the end. This thing was annoying. The next day I found some kangaroos, and I thought they looked really cool. But I still wanted to find a place to put my house and zoo. So I searched the Badlands, And while I didn't find a spot for my base, I did find one of Australia's most famous natural landmarks, Uluru. Uluru is a giant sandstone formation known as an Inselberg, or, in other words, an island mountain. And while this natural formation is important to both Australia and the indigenous Aboriginal people, the area around it can get to about 120 degrees Fahrenheit during the summer. But I wasn't too worried about that, as I had my leaf armor. Anyways, as the day continued, I eventually found where I wanted my starter base to be. So I made a quick outline. And on day 6, I decided to abandon it. I didn't really like the location I had chosen, and at this point, I was wanting my base to be on an island. No idea why, but I'm stubborn, so it was gonna happen. However, I found something that I needed to explore. It was a weird little grassy hill with a tomb of sorts inside, and when I broke in and climbed down the ladder, it was clear that I was in some sort of catacomb system. This place was eerie. These pots had some okay loot, and I narrowly avoided this trap, but I did come across some pretty nice loot in the end.
Wow. Okay.
But then I heard some sort of creature breathing, so I left. And the next day, I took to the ocean to find a spot for my base. Eventually, I found a nice enough island and started to outline my house. This took all of day 7, and on day 8, I spent the whole day getting wood for my floor. I cleared some land for my zoo as well, but decided that tomorrow I would set out to explore the area around my base. And so I did. I found this mushroom dungeon thingy, but I didn't want to explore it yet as I could hear the mobs within.
Well, just like last time, I'm gonna take these.
Moving on, I found this fishing hut, and I really liked it. The interior was exactly my style, and the location was pretty great. So yeah, I moved yet again. Anyways, as I moved, a seagull stole one of my golden carrots.
What?
And as I got back to my house, I noticed one tiny flaw about it. But I got over it, as I could barely see a dock on the island nearby, meaning that there's more to this house. And, as the sun set, I did some interpretive thinking with this piece of art.
Oh, that's water, isn't it? That's like sand with waves going over it? Or are those sandy dunes, and that's the sky with clouds?
Day 10 was all about getting familiar with my new house and its many amenities, most of which were in the kitchen cabinets. I equipped this pool float and decided to swim to the dock, because the crocs and the float had made me pretty fast. Faster than a boat even. The island itself was small but cool, as it had an archery range that came with its own wandering trader. It took some self-control to not make them my targets. But after my exercise of patience, I found something interesting.
Book and quill. Alright. The place of rue is not correct. The ones that hiss are your best bet. To find a fortune that is long forgot, if you go, your journey will not be for naught. This would be forgotten, but apart from that, very, very nicely done riddle. With the riddle in mind, I swam back to the other shore, cautious of the sharks around me. But I now had time to plan out where my zoo was going to be, and organize the kitchen drawers, because unlike in the Africa video, I wanted to be properly organized in this house. Guess this is just weird stuff right here.
But on day 11, I laid out a pretty decent outline for my zoo. I wanted the style of my zoo to kind of match my house, so that my house fit in with all the exhibits. And so, I got some wood and dedicated this chest to building materials only. I also made doors for my house, which is kind of an important detail in Australia. The next day, I finished my outline and then decided to take a little break from building and do some more exploring. This led to the discovery of these emus and Tasmanian devils. And funny enough, these things were not devils at all. Technically, they only live in Tasmania, as they went extinct in mainland Australia. But when it comes to geographical accuracy in this video, I'll make an exception for these guys. Anyways, I did some ocean exploring, only to realize that I didn't really need a boat anymore. But after like 5 minutes of me just swimming out in the ocean with no protection, I went back to the boat. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's the saying, isn't it? And as I was out in the middle of the ocean, I had nowhere to place my bed. So, I got a chance to look at the scenery. On day 13, I explored the ocean a little bit more and then realized something. All of the coral around me was there for a reason. I was in the Great Barrier Reef. Now, if you've heard of Australia, you've heard of the Great Barrier Reef. This is Australia's most iconic landmark and the largest collective living thing on the planet. This thing is around 130,000 square miles. In other words, it's huge. This thing is huge. So huge that it's even visible from space. But with that being said, the coral wasn't the only thing I was focused on. However, I saw some other, more threatening fins, as well as these creatures. But, luckily, I came across some tropical islands to explore, and these islands just so happen to be infested with lizards, and apparently whales. But I wasn't bothered, as I discovered some strange abandoned structure with some pretty cool loot. I mean, look at this fancy suit. I will absolutely be wearing it. Anyways, I camped here in the building, and the next morning, I made a sandcastle. I also pieced together why I was seeing so many lizards. See, I was on a part of a larger island group called Lizard Island, and yes, that's literally the name of it. Captain Cook came here in the late 18th century, saw that there were a lot of lizards, and so he promptly named it Lizard Island. And you know what? He was pretty spot on, as after I made my sandcastle, I got attacked by a lizard. But having explored one of the islands, I decided to head back to the mainland. I came across Uluru again, and in front of it were a couple of tarantulas, which was comforting to see. And to finish out the day, I played a little game that I named Kangaroo Game. The rules are simple. You shoot a kangaroo and see how fast it can run. But this guy didn't chase me or anything, which just made me feel bad. But the next day, I found myself surrounded by dangerous animals as I ventured towards the jungle. See, before I headed home, I wanted to climb the big rocks I had seen here a few days ago. But when I started to climb them, something else caught my attention. It was pretty clear what this makeshift structure was asking of me, and of course I would be taking it up on its offer. When I got to the top though, I realized that if I missed the water below, I would absolutely die. So I had one chance to get this right. After my off-brand bungee jumping, I figured it'd be best to head home. The only problem was that I had no clue where home was. So my plan was to follow the beaches until I found it. Funny enough, I do actually like long walks on the beach. In the meantime, I found a scene that I thought perfectly pictured Australia. And then I found another wandering trader. And you know what? I needed leads for my zoo. So I kindly borrowed the leads from him, and not long after, I came across these little guys. Finally, as night fell, I made it home. And after putting some turtle in my pan to cook, I went to sleep. Day 17 was a Labor Day. I wanted to get cobblestone and gravel for my zoo paths, and so I did just that. I also cleared out some bushes and dealt with a zombie horde that was coming out of my mines. The next day was pretty much the same, except I started off the day by discovering something dumb. This whole time I'd been living in this house, and there was a room above me, with loot. I got pirate armor and a bomb. Nothing could go wrong there. But as I said, the rest of day 18 was mostly mining and clearing. However, I decided that tomorrow I was going to go ahead and get my first zoo inhabitant. Yeah, that's right. I wanted a kangaroo. And so the next day, I set off to get my kangaroo. This was a big deal, as it would be the first animal in my zoo. And along the way, I found this big castle structure. Being the highly intellectual man that I am, I figured that there would be hordes of mobs within, and so I snuck up the side of it and was able to steal some loot. But when I got to the top, the loot was probably the best loot I'd come across yet. And with that in mind, I knew that I'd have to come back here and properly loot this castle. But for now, I wanted my kangaroo. And so finally, on day 20, I got my kangaroo. But I had to think about transporting it, as it wouldn't fit in a boat. So I led it with my lead and decided that I would just have to walk it back by the shores. And so yeah, there we were, me and my kangaroo, walking by the shores. And you know what? I think kangaroos are pretty cool. The next day, I brought my kangaroo home and started on an exhibit for it. I wanted a decent sized area as I would be getting one more kangaroo to put in here. But on day 22, after working on the exhibit some more, I got bored and decided that I wanted to explore a little. So I smashed these coconuts open and set off to fully explore the mushroom dungeon that I'd found a few days ago. I climbed up the side of it and snuck some loot, just like with the big castle. However, this loot wasn't really great. In fact, it wasn't worth it at all. The iron was nice, but after getting hit with a witch's poison, I figured that this place was just not worth it. So I went back to work on the exhibit some more, which ended up taking a lot longer than I thought. Almost like hardcore survivalist tough or something. See, I normally love building in Minecraft, but I just don't do it in survival too often. This is a bit of a learning experience for me. But anyways, I came up with a plan. I was gonna go and get this kangaroo a friend, and maybe I'd come across some new structures or locations while I was at it. So, on day 25, I went out to find another kangaroo. Now, if you're familiar with my channel, I want you to guess on what item I forgot to bring with me. If you said a bed, then you win $5,000 courtesy of Mr. Beast. Ask him for it. I'm sure he'll give it to you. Anyways, that's a long way of saying I forgot my bed. And so if I didn't find something to craft a bed out of by nightfall, I would be in a lot of trouble. But today, luck was on my side. This village was pretty great. It had a lot of good loot, silly little people, and lots of lanterns. I love lanterns as decorations, and so I ended up stealing 38 lanterns from this village. It's really dumb, but yeah, I do love lanterns. The next morning, I ended up collecting multiple emu eggs because, why not? I then found my target, kangaroo number 2. Except this time, I decided to cut through the forest rather than go along the shore. And this was the worst decision I had made in this series. The lead kept breaking, the kangaroo fully just stopped moving at certain points. Oh, and the forest was a lot tougher to walk through than I had thought. Yet, the next day, I had a bit of a relief when I thought I saw the ocean. But it wasn't the ocean. In fact, I had come across yet another landmark of Australia, Lake Hillier. As you can probably tell, this is no normal lake. In both Minecraft and real life, this lake has a saturated pink hue unlike anything else in the world. This natural color actually comes from the algae that live in the lake water. But with the sun starting to set, I didn't have time to relax by this pink lake. I'd found the ocean and ended up getting stuck in a difficult situation. On the path in front of me and my kangaroo sat many crocodiles, snakes, and spiders, all of which are some of Australia's deadliest animals. And so on morning of day 28, I carefully led my kangaroo around them, but we still ended up getting chased by a croc. But you know what? This was okay, because I'd finally gotten this kangaroo home. And on top of that, I added some water to their exhibit and was about ready to finish it. So the next day, that's what I did. And I really liked the final product. Take a look. However, I had one last thing to do, and that was to actually add the kangaroos into the exhibit. And once I did that, it looked fully complete. And they seemed to like it too. But I had a zoo to run. And in zoos, there's more than one kind of animal. At least, in good zoos. It'd be really funny if there's a zoo out there that just had like one giraffe or something. Anyways, I knew what I wanted that animal to be. This time, I got both of my leads and found my new animals pretty quickly. These guys looked really funny on leads for some reason, but I brought them back and did some work on the path outside of the kangaroo exhibit. But the next morning, I decided to place the emus with the kangaroos. A lot of zoos let animals share a habitat, and the kangaroos seem to get along well with the emus. And now, with the kangaroo and emu exhibit finally finished, I could welcome my first 2 zoo inhabitants. Kangaroos are one of Australia's most iconic animals, being the largest marsupials on the planet. And while they might be tall, these things can run up to 40 miles an hour, making them a force of nature. Emus, on the other hand, are the second tallest species of bird, being just barely beat by Africa's ostriches. But that doesn't stop this animal from being Australia's national bird. Now with my first zoo installment finally done, it was time for me to get a new animal. So, the next day, I set off to find one. And during my travels, I found myself in the Australian Alps. And in these mountains was a really cool ski lift. But when I tried to climb the lift, I almost froze to death. So I went back to finding a new animal, but I really wanted to know what was at the top of that lift. Anyways, I soon came across my starter base from like day 5, and it turns out I had left some food in the furnace. So I took my food and camped at the Pink Lake. And on day 33, I found my next animal. And it was a bold choice.
Alright, let's see if this works. This would be really impressive if I can do this.
I snuck up to the 2 crocs and attached my leads. I had to be really careful as these guys were fast. And if I got too close, well, this would happen.
Oh, okay. That's a lot of damage that thing just did.
I took them out to the ocean and they started misbehaving because of this butterfly.
Is there a butterfly in the ocean? Don't eat it. Stop.
But I got them home just in time. And the next day, I had to figure out exactly what I wanted their exhibit to look like. I came up with a general idea and got to work. I eventually finished the outline, but I really wanted different wood types for this one. And the only place I knew of with different wood types was the abandoned building on Lizard Island. And so, after playing with my dishes,
What? This is a actual, like, holdy thingy?
I set off for Lizard Island, ready to get all of the wood that I could manage. But as I rowed my boat into the ocean, I came across a new boat. And this one was surrounded by sharks. After finding some cool loot on the boat, I went to the back of it, only to realize that there was a shark cage attached under the water. Now, I hate this kind of stuff, okay? I don't like sharks, I don't like the ocean, and I don't know, there's probably something else I don't like too. But I went into the cage and looted this chest, and as soon as I clicked on this chum, sharks started swarming my area. I narrowly escaped, and used the chum to lead the sharks away from the boat. This was because I was going to strip the boat of its wool and blackstone. And the next morning, I did just that. I got a lot of blackstone, wool, and iron, and then the sharks started to return, so I hopped in my boat and sailed to Lizard Island. From there, I got to the abandoned building and stripped that of all of its blocks as well. With my mission a success, it was time to return home to build the crocodile exhibit. Along the way, I found yet another new boat, but as my inventory was full, I'd have to loot this one later. I arrived back home the next morning and got to work on the enclosure. Eventually, I finished enough of it to put the crocs in, and accidentally got stuck in there with them. But with the crocodile exhibit done, let's take a look at what these animals mean to Australia. For starters, the saltwater crocodile is the largest reptile in the world, and the most dangerous. In fact, while these things can eat animals like snakes or kangaroos, they can also eat other feared predators like sharks. Besides, these things are almost as old as dinosaurs, and I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. But with that being said, it was yet again time for a new animal. And I knew what animal I wanted this time. And so, I went over and got these 2 Tasmanian devils and brought them back, immediately getting to work on their exhibit. I smelted a lot of glass and stone. The next day, I kept my focus on the Tasmanian devil exhibit, but when I went to touch up the crocodile enclosure, this hermit crab fell into it. Poor guy.
Oh, there's a hermit crab in there now? I hope they tear it to pieces.
I finished out the day by doing some work on paths, and I feel like that's a very underappreciated part of this. I have so many pathways, and honestly, this takes longer than literally anything else. But when the sun rose on day 43, I got up and finished the Tasmanian devil exhibit. These little guys were hard to get into the enclosure, but they seemed to like it. And so, let's see why these devils are so important to Tasmania. The Tasmanian devil might look friendly, but it gets its name for being a ferocious carnivore, and having the strongest bite relative to size out of any mammal on Earth. In other words, you do not want to be a rabbit or wombat, as those are what it tends to eat. But with a deadly ball of fur now happily in its enclosure, it was time yet again to expand my zoo. But you know what? I now had 4 different species in my zoo, and that was kind of cool to see. However, as I set off to find a new animal on day 44, I had no idea which creature I wanted next. Oh, and by the way, about 5 minutes into my journey, I remembered to go back and get my bed. So, be proud of me. Anyways, as I entered the Badlands, I found an entirely new village. This village barely had any loot though. I did end up stealing a smithing table, anvil, and enchanting table, which I thought would all be useful. The next morning, I left the village and decided to head for the jungle. I hadn't explored it much, and I figured there must be an animal or two for me to find in it. But an animal for my zoo wasn't the first thing I found. I stripped this structure of its dark oak wood, and the only loot this chest had was random dyes. Kinda useless if you ask me, but I don't know, maybe the dye will come in handy later. Anyways, I was pretty surprised when I came across this giant temple in the jungle. Don't know how I missed it before. But I stole all of the banners off of it, and climbed to the top, where there's a small entrance. I camped up here for the night, planning to explore it the next day. And on day 46, that's just what I did. Now, this temple was cool, but very dangerous. It had some nice loot, but around every single corner there was a new trap. I disabled so many traps, and even set a few off.
Oh.
Then I came across this horde of zombies.
Uh-oh. No?
And I used my anvil to damage them.
Well, it wasn't a terrible idea, just wasn't a good one either.
I know. My intelligence is truly immeasurable.
Okay.
Anyways, I also came across this room full of skeletons. And for some reason, I found another wandering trader.
What are you doing here?
And so, being the kind person I am, I relieved the trader of its leads. Plus, it just so happened that I was looking for leads anyways, so, I know, very convenient. But as the sun started to set, I found my new animal. Now, in real life, echidnas are the smaller cousin of anteaters, native to Australia. So, I figured that's what these were, and started to lead them back to my base. I also came across this giant snake that I tried to attach to my leads. I guess it just didn't want to come with me. Ah, what a shame.
Come on.
But as I led them through the jungle, I realized that this waterfall that I'd come across earlier in the series wasn't just a normal waterfall. Wallaman Falls is Australia's tallest waterfall with one single drop. The waterfall itself is almost 900 feet tall, earning its place as a World Heritage Site. But waterfalls aside, I now had both of my echidnas attached to my boat, and they were pretty good swimmers. Also, my cat started snoring really loudly here, so I thought I'd share that.
Valentino, why are you snoring so loud? Buddy, are you okay?
But as I went out towards the ocean, I caught sight of something truly unexpected.
That's a jump scare. Okay. Definitely don't have the space in my inventory to explore that right now, but okay, this is by the jungle. Alright, we gotta come back.
The next day, I brought the echidnas home and ended up upgrading my shield into a jade shield, as well as upgrading my diamond pickaxe so it had efficiency 1 and unbreaking 1. On day 49, I spent the whole day working on paths. And yeah, that's literally it. Nothing interesting here. However, the next day was an important milestone in this series, as it was day 50, halfway through the series. And if you've made it this far with me, you should just subscribe. Might as well celebrate day 50 with me by subscribing or becoming a channel member to see exclusive videos. Either way, I have a lot more videos like this one coming out in the future, so stay tuned. But with my subscribe speech done, I worked on the paths some more. And I really love this diamond pickaxe. But diamond pick aside, it was finally time for me to put the echidnas in their habitat and properly welcome them. Echidnas are one of Australia's native species and, apart from platypuses, they're the only mammal to lay eggs. These little guys can be found in almost any climate in Australia and are easily one of Australia's cutest animals. On day 52, I did even more path work and dubbed this day Housekeeping Day. Normally I would go and get a new animal about now, but I figured that it was time to do some zoo upkeeping. And that's why, the next day, I added these really cool lampposts. I also added actual paths that go from one exhibit to the next. And yeah, this place was finally starting to look like a zoo. But out of nowhere, pillagers arrived. I took them out quickly, as it turns out my jade shield made arrows simply bounce off of it. But finally, on day 54, I set off for my next animal. Once again, I had no clue as to what animal I'd be bringing back, but I knew that I couldn't visit villages for a few days due to the bad omen brought by the pillagers. Yes, I did learn a thing or two from my Africa video. While looking for a new animal, I figured that it'd be fun to jump from Wallaman Falls. So, I did. I also got to row through crocodile country again, which was great. But as I followed the shoreline, I came across one of Australia's natural landmarks, the 12 Apostles. These natural rock formations were caused by erosion millions of years ago, and while only 8 of the 12 Apostles still remain, that number will probably change over the years as these sea stacks continue to be shaped by water and wind. And, just down the shoreline, I found a little beachside setup. I sold this radio and a few chairs before deciding that tomorrow, instead of finding a new animal, I was going to explore the lighthouse nearby. So, the next day, I docked my boat at the lighthouse and entered it.
Oh.
And this thing was nerve-wracking. Hermit crabs, zombies, and skeletons filled the staircase, making it difficult for me to climb it. I ended up knocking a few of them to their death, but after a few minutes, I made it to the top. And the loot was pretty cool.
Good.
On day 57, I found my next zoo animal on a nearby island. I completely forgot that platypuses were a part of Australia, and so I was happy to see them. I started bringing them home when I found, not a wandering trader, but a wandering winemaker.
Wandering winemaker. Okay.
Anyways, on day 58, I got them home. I attached them to this post and went down to do some mining, but when I returned, they were gone. This was pretty upsetting, as it meant that I couldn't have platypuses in my zoo, given that they would just despawn. Plus, they're just all around cool animals, and I really wanted them in my zoo. But I'm a zoo tycoon, okay? I am the Planet Zoo. Population, me. That was really dumb, but still, I had to get a new animal to keep this zoo thriving. And this time, I had forgotten to fill my water. And I just kept taking fall damage.
Gosh.
Because of course I did. Towards the end of the day though, I came across what would be my next zoo animal, dingoes. I attached these two to leads, but not before having a close encounter with some crocs. Finally, on day 60, I caught a break. I'd come across this strange farmhouse in the middle of the forest, and it was absolutely stacked with some of the best and weirdest loot yet.
Fermented shark.
But my inventory was full, and I had a zoo to run. So I made sure to remember where this place was,
This is so cool.
and then I set off for home with my dingoes. The very next day, I brought them home and started on their exhibit. For this exhibit, I was going to keep it simple and just make a forest-themed area. But this same day, I also started on a side project. See, I wanted a big fountain to sit in the middle of my zoo, and then I would place my special lamp that I got early in this series on top. And so, the next day, I went to go and get some light blue concrete for the fountain's floor. However, this involved me swimming near all of the great whites. But I got the concrete and placed my special lantern. I had quite the jump scare when I thought a tiny Enderman had invaded my house, but then I just realized that the lantern illuminates all of the mobs near it. But this guy looks pretty funny. Anyways, on day 63, I finished the fountain. I thought this thing looked pretty good. I also did a lot of work on the dingo exhibit, and the next day, I finished it. See, dingoes are kind of like wild dogs. In fact, they're the largest carnivores in Australia, and while they can be friendly, it's best to be careful around these wild animals. And with that being said, I want to take a break from paths today and explore a place that I hadn't explored much of yet, the Australian Alps. So, I made some warm clothes and set off for the Alps. I came across the same ski lift as before, and after taking some frog lights, I had to shelter myself from a blizzard. But the next morning, I finally looted the ski lift cabin, and inside was some pretty okay loot. But the best thing I'd found yet was this sled. I took it out for a ride, and it was genuinely so much fun. I don't know why Minecraft doesn't have these, but Honestly though, I don't care. Look at this. This is so much fun. Sleds are amazing. Anyways, I soon found a weird gingerbread house with nothing in it, and after exploring some more, I found what would be my next zoo animal, a goat. There was only one goat from what I could see, but I attached it to my lead and headed home. In the meantime, I did some research just to make sure goats would be a viable animal for my Australian zoo, and as it turns out, feral goats are a giant invasive species in Australia, being brought to the island in the 18th century. So, it's just as well as taking this guy to my zoo. And, on day 66, we arrived back home. I started on the goat exhibit, and correct me if I'm wrong, but are these sharks bigger? Moving on, the next day was yet another path day. However, I also decided that maybe a smaller zoo would be better, as I was running out of animals for this zoo. And on day 68, I swear the sharks got even bigger. Or maybe there's just more of them. I don't know. Maybe I'm going crazy. Anyways, I got sick after eating some fermented shark, because of course I did. And then I went to go and make more paths. I love paths. My file for day 69 was corrupted, so here's some footage from day 70. But not much happened apart from me finishing my goat exhibit. Oh, and the goat can jump out of the exhibit too, so I had to fix that. And after getting nausea again, I fixed the goat exhibit. See, I wanted to challenge myself, and yeah, this sucked. Skip like 10 seconds into the video if you get nauseous easily, because this is really bad. I don't know why I did this. But with my goat exhibit finally done, let's see what these animals are all about. Australia's feral goats can now be found in about a third of the country's territories, being an invasive species brought in by European settlers. And, according to PestSmart, these goats cost livestock farming around $25 million per year. But they're still cute. And with that being said, my zoo is in good shape. In fact, I decided that I only had room for 2 more exhibits. So, as I mined more cobblestone for the paths, I thought about what those animals should be. But that didn't matter just yet, as when I woke on day 71, my goat exhibit had a new resident. I was genuinely baffled by this. But then I came across this snake and decided that I wanted to make a mini exhibit for him. And then he bit me. It hurt. A lot. Anyways, at the end of the day, I set off for a new animal and once again came across the big castle structure. And the next day, I looted some more of it. This was incredibly dangerous, and a creeper almost killed me instantly. But I got some cool loot. I also stumbled across the first village, and this kangaroo was just stuck in their roof.
How did you...
I thought that was pretty funny. But after leaving the Badlands, I sailed to Lizard Island, as I wanted my next animal to be a monitor of some sort. And yet, as I reached Lizard Island, I discovered that the lizards here did not attach to my lead. So, back to the forest I went. And eventually, I found a really cool animal that did attach to my lead. A sugar glider. These things were really cute, but I also felt like a parent trying to get them to follow me.
You just flew off into oblivion. What is wrong with you? What is actually physically wrong with you?
And, as luck would have it, I had left my bed at Lizard Island. I mean, we all saw this coming, but still. The next morning, I went to get my bed, but I also decided to let my cat Valentino sit in my lap here. And, well, it was not the best choice.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That was... Alright, Tino, look, if you're gonna sit in my lap, you have to be still. No, there's a zombie, buddy. Hey. Hey, no.
But
stop.
Eventually, I got the sugar gliders home. And on day 75, I got to work on the snake exhibit. And this thing was terrible. Both the snake and the exhibit, to be honest. The snake bit me as I tried to put it in the enclosure, and then got loose. But the next morning, I managed to get it in the habitat and seal the top of it. And yeah, I did not like this snake. But I discovered that I could cook and eat emu eggs, so that's cool. Days 77 and 78 were almost exclusively for path work and decorations, but when I was working on the lampposts on day 78, this strange villager appeared.
What?
Turns out this guy was an arms dealer.
Why is this the interface? This is like the meme.
And so of course I bought some bombs from him. But these things are pretty weak. That is, until I got TNT and turned them into TNT bundles. And then threw one right below my feet.
Oh.
I'm amazed that I have made it this far. Like, I make the stupidest decisions. Anyways, the next day I worked on the sugar glider exhibit, and ended up almost finishing all of the paths. This made me really happy. And finally, on day 80, I finished the sugar glider enclosure. See, these little guys aren't only cute, but they love to eat sweet things. They glide from tree to tree and catch insects mid-air. These small marsupials are also native to Australia. And now, with the sugar glider exhibit done, I turned my attention to my plans for an ocean exhibit. See, I wanted some sort of underwater lookout area that connects to the dock, and so I started making as much glass as I could. Eventually, on day 83, I finished the outside of the enclosure and started to fill it with dirt so I could drain the water. However, the next day, I stumbled across these artifact shards and remembered that the tent in the jungle that I discovered early in the series had some sort of artifact shard table. So, out of pure curiosity, I decided to head to the jungle. And that afternoon, I had a nice time doing some fishing. The next morning, I found the tent and brushed my artifacts, only to discover that they would turn into enchantment books. I got one that was for elytras, which I didn't have, and the other book made it so if I applied it to a pickaxe, it would mine the block behind the one I destroy as well. I could have used this a lot earlier in the series. Anyways, I did some fishing in Croc Country, and on day 86, I came across this giant drop-off, and this thing was scary. I could just barely see the silhouettes of creatures I'd rather not even imagine. But at least I also found this boat that I had yet to loot. And inside this chest was some diving gear as well as a lot of explosives. Now I didn't see myself using these in the next 15 days, so I decided to have some fun. I lured in a lot of sharks with chum and then threw all of my explosives into the water and blew up a few of them. Yeah, not much else to say about that. I am now a wanted man in Australia. Anyways, the next day, I arrived back home and used my new diving gear to work on the ocean exhibit. And this thing is weird. It made my FOV zoom in a lot, and I could also breathe underwater, so I guess it's a fair trade-off. But I finally finished the ocean exhibit on day 88, and this thing was really cool. Yet, I still had one problem with my zoo. I had no visitors, and I wanted to change that. See, I figured that if I got enough villagers and built them a little shed with beds, they would be permanent visitors. And so the next day, I got to work on their luxury shed. This is some of my best work, really. Take a look. And believe it or not, I found my first resident shortly after. This wandering trader had no idea how lucky he was. And after depositing resident number 1, I traveled to the Badlands village to get some more zoo visitors. I stole this villager here and got him in my boat. And that's when I realized how painful this was going to be. This boat was incredibly slow on land, and the villager escaped a few times. But I hunted him down and got him back in the boat. It wasn't until the end of the day that we actually got to the ocean. And on day 92, I finally got him to my zoo. And look at this guy, he loves it. But my work wasn't done as I needed more visitors, and so I set off again for the Badlands village. I eventually arrived, found a villager, and got him in my boat. When we reached the ocean though, I noticed that he was looking at me in a weird kind of way. I don't quite know how to take this. But I got him to the zoo, and the next day, I set off for one more villager. This time, I made a little game called Stick Game. How it works is I hit a dead bush, and sometimes a stick comes out, and sometimes nothing comes out. Riveting. But on day 95, I got this guy to my zoo, and it was infuriating trying to get him on the dock. Look at this. Really. From here, I spent the rest of the day making last-minute repairs and detailing certain areas. And as I did so, I couldn't help but think back on the journey that brought me here. And when day 100 rolled around, I got out of my house and visited each zoo enclosure one last time. Then, I climbed up onto the balcony to take one last look at what I had made. Yeah. Well, guys, we did it. I give Australia's survivability a 5 out of 10. And because I didn't do it in the Africa video, I give Africa a 6 out of 10 for survivability. Australia just had more dangerous animals and dangerous places. But with that being said, it's time for me to end.
Okay.
Until we meet again.